Story 1. I'm from Lexington, Kentucky, and for 2 years I worked the stock team at Kohl's. It wasn't glamorous. Late nights, fluorescent lights, and lifting boxes till your arms go numb. But the pay was decent, and I liked the quiet after closing time. No customers, no managers hovering, just you and a few other tired souls trying to stay awake under the hum of overhead lights. Every December, right before the Christmas insanity, they'd call in a handful of us to do an overnight shift, 12 of us in total, to set out the new holiday merchandise. This one year, I volunteered again because I needed the extra hours. The store was closed, we clocked in at 9 p.m., and by 2:30 in the morning, I was running on fumes. I was stationed in the back near bedding. Our store was laid out so the bedding section hugged the back wall, tucked beside the employee-only stockroom. There was an end cap there with clearance picture frames. Cheap stuff, the kind people grab as stocking stuffers. I was a few aisles down, jamming oversized comforters into shelves that didn't want to hold them. I took a step back to check if they looked presentable. They didn't, but I figured I'd fix it after a sip of water. Then I heard it, a sharp crack. Glass. I turned fast. A picture frame had fallen from the end cap behind me. One of those cheap 5x7 ones. It wasn't just on the floor either. It had shattered, but no one had touched it. I mean that literally. I'd been the only one in that entire section. Everyone else was working on apparel or setting up fake trees by the registers. There was nothing near it that could have knocked it over. The frame was set on a wire rack, the kind with a little lip to keep stuff from sliding off. It would have taken a push. I stood there for a second, waiting for someone to call out or admit they'd walked by and bumped it, but the silence just stretched. I didn't think much of it at first. Just figured it was loose or the shelf was bent or whatever. I was too damn tired to start making it a thing. I sighed, turned around, and headed into the stockroom to grab a broom and dustpan. We kept that stuff in the housekeeping closet in the farthest corner of the back room, basically the edge of the building. That stockroom was always weirdly quiet. Cold, too, like the insulation never quite reached that far back. But that night felt off as soon as I walked in. The lights were on a motion sensor, so they blinked to life as I stepped through. I could hear the hum of the overhead conveyor belts that ran near the ceiling. It's a setup we used to store hanging clothes, women's blouses, jackets, whatever, zipped in those clear plastic bags and hung on metal rods that the track moved around the room. I was walking under that conveyor system when I noticed something. One bag, just one, was swinging back and forth. I stopped. It was about 10 feet up, directly over me. A bag of clothes moving steadily like someone had just shoved it. You could hear the metal hook squeaking slightly as it rocked. None of the others were moving, not a single one. The others hung straight down, still and silent. I looked around. Nobody was in there with me. That's when it hit me. If someone had activated the belt recently, it would have been loud. It clanks and whines when it runs. I hadn't heard anything. I'd been right in the bedding section next door, and that thing's like a damn roller coaster when it's moving. I don't know why, but I just froze under that swaying bag like an idiot. It wasn't just the movement, it was how deliberate it felt, like someone had pushed it, not from the belt moving. Just that one bag swaying like someone walked by and hit it with their hand. I backed away. I didn't take my eyes off it. The rest of the stockroom was dead still, lights humming, air thick, like something was waiting. I grabbed the broom and ran back into the store. Didn't even check the closet. I just needed to be back where other people were. But when I got there, the picture frame was gone. I swear to God it was gone. No glass, no frame, no mess. Like it never happened. I stood there holding that broom like a bat, just staring at the empty floor. I walked up and down the bedding section, thinking maybe I misremembered where it fell. Maybe someone cleaned it up. I asked around. I pulled aside one of the girls on the floor, Megan, and said, "Hey, did you clean up a broken frame back by bedding?" She blinked. "What frame?" I went to my buddy Derek. Same thing. No one had touched it. None of them even saw it fall. I didn't hear anyone sweeping or picking up shards. And I heard it break. I saw the damn thing shattered on the tile. I didn't finish the shift. I told my supervisor I felt sick and clocked out early. I lied and said I had a stomach bug. I never signed up for an overnight again. Story 2, I never believed in any of that ghost shit. Not growing up, not when I got into nursing, not even when I started doing overnights at the state psych hospital here in Connecticut. People hear voices all the time in this place. That's just part of the job. I was on Unit 3E the night it happened. That's detox and evaluation. Mostly people coming off meth or booze, a couple of 302s, sometimes someone on a pink slip if they're high risk but waiting on a bed upstairs. The building's ancient, though, probably 1950s. Long hallways with green tile and peeling beige walls. The kind of place that hums from the inside, you know? Old air vents, buzzing fluorescents, flickering motion sensors in rooms nobody's walked into. Anyway, it was around 3:30 a.m. when the charge nurse, Carla, asked if I could float upstairs for a bit. Something about a tech calling out early on 5A. I didn't argue. I figured I'd just finish my rounds up there and come back down. Detox is quiet that time of night. 5A's different. It's locked. More long-term psych and forensic evals. They don't even keep the lights on unless a room is occupied. I'd only been up there a handful of times before, so I had to ask the tech at the desk, Mark, which rooms were filled. He was this grumpy old dude who looked like he'd been working nights since the Reagan administration. He points down the hall and says, just 227, 229, and 235 tonight. The rest are clean. So I walk the hall, flashlight in hand. The whole floor smells like pine sol and piss, like every other unit in that building. I'm checking each door, peeking through the little windows, ticking names off on my clipboard. When I get to 232, I pause. Lights are off inside the bedroom, but I notice something weird. The bathroom light's on, and the door's open just enough to see that someone left the faucet dripping. I don't think much of it. Probably housekeeping missed it during turnover. I knock gently. Staff, I say. No answer. Coming in. I reach for the handle on the bathroom door. Just as my fingers brush it, the door yanks itself out of my grip and slams shut. Not like someone slammed it from inside, like it snatched itself shut. And then the banging started, loud, fast, like someone inside was punching the tile walls, full force, over and over. Boom, 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 boom. I stepped back so fast I almost tripped over the med cart. Hello? I said louder this time. This is staff. Are you okay in there? No response, just 5 or 6 more loud, echoing slams. I waited maybe 10 seconds. It stopped just as suddenly as it started. Nothing but the faucet still dripping. I opened the door. No one. Not in the bathroom. Not behind the door. No one could have left the room without passing me. I swear on everything I own. I stood there, my heart in my throat, scanning every corner like a moron. I even looked up, thinking maybe someone climbed into the ceiling vent. But no, the vent cover was bolted shut, thick with dust. The mirror wasn't fogged, no footprints on the tile, nothing. The water was still running in the sink. That was real. I turned it off, stepped out of the room, and went straight back to the desk. Mark looked up from his crossword like he hadn't heard a damn thing. I said, "Hey, you sure 232's empty?" He squinted. "Yeah, been empty for months." There was a light on in the bathroom, and I stopped myself. And someone was definitely in there. Mark let out a weird little breath. "You didn't go in there, did you?" I didn't answer. He looked down the hall, then back at me. "We don't assign 232 anymore. Not since that thing with the guy who hung himself in the shower a few years back. Patient named Jesse. Came in on a court hold, slashed his wrist the first week, survived. Said he was hearing someone behind the mirror talking to him. The week after, he tore out one of the soap dishes from the wall and used it to beat himself in the face. Said it wouldn't stop screaming. I thought he was screwing with me. "Come on. I'm serious," he said. Then one night he managed to string a sheet through the sprinkler head and hung himself. They didn't find him till the morning. Camera in the hallway caught nothing. I looked at the bathroom door again. It was wide open now. Light off. Mark added, "Only time anyone ever pulled footage from that wing, the file came back corrupt. Admin blamed a power surge." I didn't say anything. I sat down and just kept my eyes on the board until my shift ended. When I got back down to detox, I didn't tell Carla anything. Didn't want to sound like I'd lost it, but I still remember how that door yanked shut like it had a mind of its own. Like something didn't want me looking in. That pounding, it didn't sound like fists, not exactly. It sounded off, like someone trying to break out with bones instead of hands. I worked nights at that hospital for another year and a half, but I never took another float to 5A. Every time it came up, I found an excuse. Said I had meds to pass, paperwork due, whatever. Carla probably thought I was just lazy. I don't care. Whatever was in 232 that night wasn't human, and I'm not going back. Story 3. I used to work security at a small private hospital in upstate New York. Nothing fancy, just a dozen rooms per floor, 3 floors total, mostly long-term care and a few psych patients. It was an old Catholic building before it became a hospital, so it had this permanent draft and those long, echoey hallways that made your footsteps sound like they weren't always your own. My shift was always 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., and during that time I had the 3rd floor all to myself. It was supposed to be empty, under renovation, unused, but I had to walk it every hour just to log the rounds. Half the lights didn't work. Paint peeled from the ceilings, and there was this constant hum from the old wiring. I hated going up there. Everyone did. Even the day staff joked about it being haunted, which I didn't find funny, but you know how people are. Anyway, this happened last winter, maybe January. I remember it was snowing heavy that night, the kind of quiet snow that swallows all the sound outside. I had just finished my 2nd round upstairs and came back to the break room on the 2nd floor for some coffee. Everything was normal. Lights on, security cams static-free. I even texted my wife that I'd call her on my lunch. I wasn't scared, wasn't anxious, just bored and cold. Around 2:45 a.m., I went back up for the next round. My flashlight was acting up, but I didn't think much of it. The floor was pitch black, except for the emergency lights near the nurse's station. As soon as I stepped out of the stairwell, I noticed it. There was this loud banging coming from one of the rooms down the hall, like someone slamming a metal drawer over and over. It echoed sharp and fast, no rhythm to it. I froze. The floor was supposed to be empty. Not even maintenance was scheduled until next week. I called out, "Hello? Security, who's up here?" No answer. Just another bang and another. It sounded closer. I walked toward the sound, down the left wing, flashlight flickering like it was on its last breath. When I got to room 317, the sound stopped. I waited. My ears were ringing from the silence. I knocked once. "Anyone in there?" Nothing. I opened the door. The room was empty. No bed, no chairs, just dust and peeling wallpaper. No metal drawers, nothing that could have made that sound. The only window was shut, and there were no vents open. I stood there for a second, trying to convince myself maybe the sound came from somewhere else. Maybe a pipe, maybe a bird hit the window, maybe anything. Then I heard it again, from behind me. I turned fast, nearly dropping the flashlight. The hallway was empty, but the sound kept going. Banging, now steady, like fists hitting the wall. I followed it back down the hall, heart pounding so loud I could barely hear myself breathe. When I got back to the nurse's station, I saw something I'll never forget as long as I live. The monitors were on. That's not the weird part. The weird part was that they were showing feeds from patient rooms. Rooms that shouldn't have had any power. Rooms that were disconnected months ago. I leaned in to look closer. Room 319 showed a bed. There was someone in it, just lying there under the sheet, facing the wall. I knew for a fact that room was stripped down. No bed, no sheets, no power. I checked the other screens, blank, just static. But 319 was clear as day. I grabbed the radio. "Base, this is Adam. Do we have anyone else logged in for 3rd floor maintenance?" No response. Just crackle. I repeated louder. "Base, do you copy?" Nothing. I was about to bolt down the stairs when the monitor flickered, and the figure in the bed sat up. I felt my chest tighten. My skin burned cold. The person, whoever it was, turned their head slowly, like stiffly, toward the camera. And I swear to God, they looked straight at me. Not at the lens. At me. I couldn't move. I didn't blink. It felt like if I did, something terrible would happen. Then the figure stood. The sheet fell off and revealed this thin, pale body with limbs that looked too long. The camera feed distorted, lines cutting across the screen like static, and then it moved toward the door of the room. The camera followed it. I stepped back, heart racing, thinking how the hell is this camera moving? These were old mounted units, fixed. No pan, no tilt. And then, just as the figure reached the doorway, the monitor went black. And that same loud banging, it started again, right down the hallway, right behind me. I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. I felt it there, breathing, close. I dropped the flashlight and ran like a damn child. I didn't stop until I was 2 floors down, back in the ER security booth, locked behind glass and shaking so hard I dropped my keys. I didn't finish the shift. I waited for the nurse on duty to show up and told her I was sick. I called in the next 2 nights. Story 4. I grew up in a nowhere town in central Missouri where the only things to do past 10 p.m. were Walmart runs, bonfires in the woods, or screwing around with things you probably shouldn't. We were high school juniors when my friend Mark dragged us into ghost hunting. He'd just gotten his hands on one of those cheap EMF detectors off eBay and called it his spirit box. I thought it was all bullshit, just something to do instead of drinking. But it started feeling real when we kept going back to this small cemetery about a half-mile from my house. I'd always heard things about that place. People called it the gates of hell because of a weird rusted arch at the entrance. And there were local stories of people hearing babies crying or seeing shadows walk along the tree line. Everyone laughed about it during the day, but it felt different at night. Cold, wrong. One time we were leaving around midnight and a guy pulled up in a black pickup. Said he used to be with Taps, like the ghost hunters people. We thought he was messing with us, but he was dead serious. He pointed right at me and said, "That cemetery's active." I've been all over. In that spot right there, most intense readings I ever got. I played it cool, laughed it off, but I remember my stomach sinking. That cemetery was right by my house. I brushed it all off until a week later. It was a Thursday. I remember because I had wrestling practice and didn't get home until almost 9 p.m. I showered, ate leftovers, and went straight to bed. I didn't feel weird or scared or anything, just tired. I usually slept with my door shut and a little fan on low, blowing at the side of my bed. That night felt colder than usual, but I figured the fan was hitting me weird. I rolled over and knocked out. I don't know what time it was when I woke up. There was no sound, no creaking, no fan, no hum of the fridge from down the hall. Just silence. Then thunk. Something smacked me right on the crown of my head, hard enough to wake me instantly. My first thought was that my phone or a book fell from the headboard shelf. It felt like it was still on my head. Half asleep, I reached up to brush it off. What I touched wasn't plastic or paper. It was a hand, cold, damp. The texture of raw meat left out too long. I felt 5 fingers, one curled against my temple, and I froze. I didn't scream, didn't even breathe. My body went cold. I just wrapped my fingers around its wrist and without thinking, yanked it off my head. It was heavy, like throwing a weight. It landed beside my bed with a solid, meaty thud. That sound, it wasn't imagined. That happened. I leapt up, not rolled, not crawled, leapt. Like I blinked and I was across the room, slamming the light switch. The whole room lit up and I stood there, back to the wall, panting like I just sprinted a mile. Nothing was there. No one under the bed. No one in the closet. I checked every inch of the floor, even flipped my mattress. I stood there shaking with this awful, creeping awareness that something had been there. It had touched me. I touched it back, and it had weight. I didn't sleep that night, just sat in my desk chair with the light on, staring at the spot next to my bed. I didn't tell anyone the next day. I kept thinking maybe I hallucinated it. Maybe I was dreaming and jolted myself awake. But no dream would give me that sensation. The weight of it, the texture. A few days later, I mentioned it to Mark while we were sitting in the back of his truck outside Casey's. He got real quiet. Then he said, "You remember that guy with the truck? The Taps guy?" What if you brought something back? I didn't answer. I didn't want to even consider it. Here's the part that still messes me up. A few weeks after that, I passed the cemetery while walking home from the gas station. It was late, just past midnight, and as I walked past the rusted arch, I stopped. The trees were moving in the breeze, but dead center of the graveyard, I saw something pale, maybe 3 feet tall, just standing there. It didn't move, didn't run, just stood perfectly still. I didn't go back, haven't been to that cemetery since. I don't even drive that road anymore if I can help it. People think hauntings are dramatic, screams in the hallway, flying objects. But this wasn't like that. It was quiet. One moment, one touch. And I knew something wasn't right in my house. I didn't imagine it. I know what I felt. That hand was real. Cold, wet, dead. And when I threw it, it landed. It landed hard. Story 5. I don't talk about this often, mainly because it makes me sound insane, and I don't like the way people look at me afterward. I live in St. Louis, Missouri, and back in my mid-20s, I worked the night shift at a local museum downtown. I won't name the place, but it was one of those historical buildings, the kind that's been repurposed too many times. Originally a vaudeville theater in the early 1900s, then a car dealership, then just a rotting husk for decades until the city turned it into a cultural site. I was a floor manager. That meant when the place closed, I was usually one of the last to leave. We'd count down drawers, lock up exhibits, power everything down, and set the alarms. Typical stuff. The building always had a strange feel to it, especially after dark. Cold spots, that dense, weird stillness. You'd be walking through one of the exhibits and feel like someone was right behind you. But when you turned around, nothing. You get used to it, though, or you pretend to. That night it was me and Rachel, the assistant manager. We were standing on the second floor landing near the stairwell. It was about 8:45 p.m. The museum had closed half an hour earlier, and we were just chatting before heading back downstairs to lock up the gift shop. Lights were dimmed, but not off. Everything was quiet like always. Then we heard it, the soft ding of the elevator. We both looked at each other. "That yours?" I asked. Rachel shook her head. "No one called it." The elevator was behind us, maybe 30 feet down the hallway. We couldn't see it from where we were standing because of the corner wall, but we definitely heard the door slide open. That metallic scrape was unmistakable. We both kind of laughed it off. The elevator had been acting up for a few weeks, opening on its own, going to random floors, but the repair guy had said it was likely a wiring issue. Annoying, but not surprising in a building that old. We were mid-conversation again when it happened. A little boy ran around the corner. He couldn't have been older than 7 or 8. Red shirt, dark pants, bare feet. His head was slightly tilted down, and I could see a mop of dark hair covering part of his face. He didn't look at us. He just sprinted past like he was late for dinner or something, heading straight for the stairs. It happened so fast. Neither of us said anything until he was halfway up to the 3rd floor. I remember my mouth opening but no words coming out. Rachel was the first to speak. "Did you see that?" "Yeah," I said, my voice shaky. What the hell?" "Did we miss someone?" she asked, already starting to move toward the stairs. "No way, right?" I followed her, and we both went up. The 3rd floor is small, just a couple of rotating exhibits and one emergency exit that stays locked from the inside. No corners to hide behind, no restrooms. It took us maybe 20 seconds to check the whole floor. No one was there. No kid, no red shirt, nothing. We checked the emergency exit. It was still chained. I even walked over and put my hand on it. Cold as hell. Rachel pulled out her phone and checked the cameras, but of course the feed for that stairwell glitched right when it happened. Like literally a frozen frame of the empty hallway. Nothing before, nothing after. I looked at her, and she looked at me. Both of us were pale. I felt cold sweat down my back. "Did you get a good look at him?" I asked. She nodded slowly. "Red shirt, dark pants, no shoes." "Same," I said. We walked back down the stairs in silence. I could feel every step, like I was being watched from above. The whole place felt wrong now, like the air had shifted. He hadn't made a sound when he ran. No footsteps, no heavy breathing, just the sight of him out of nowhere and the awful, awful stillness afterward. I tried to rationalize it the whole night. Maybe we had missed a kid. Maybe someone brought their kid to the museum and we somehow overlooked him during closing. But that didn't make sense. There was only one entrance and one exit to that floor, and I had personally walked it 15 minutes before. Every door was locked, every room empty. Story 6, I used to clean offices in downtown Louisville, Kentucky. Just regular night janitorial work. Empty trash cans, vacuum the floors, wipe down windows. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady. Most nights I'd have earbuds in, working through one floor at a time. And by the time I hit the third or fourth office, the building was dead quiet. That's when I noticed something was off. This wasn't a graveyard shift either. I always started around 5 p.m. and wrapped up by 9. Latest. So it was still light out when this happened. That's what makes it worse somehow. You don't expect that kind of thing when the sun's still out. Anyway, this one building I did twice a week had 2 floors, and the second floor was mostly empty ever since COVID. Companies moved to remote work and never really came back. Only one small accounting firm was left up there, and they were always gone by 6 p.m. That day I came in a bit early, around 4:30, just to knock it out quicker. By 5:15 the place was quiet. The firm upstairs had shut their door and locked up. I watched them leave through the front glass as I took out a bag of trash. After that, I went back up with the vacuum and started with the hallway. It's one of those long, narrow corridors lined with fake potted plants and prints of mountains that never change. The women's bathroom is at the very end, next to the break room. I was halfway through vacuuming the carpet when I heard a toilet flush. At first, I thought nothing of it. Maybe someone stayed behind. But then the sink turned on. That sound, the faucet's weak sputter, and then the steady stream of water hitting porcelain, it went on too long. I stood there, vacuum still running, waiting for whoever it was to come out. They didn't. I shut the vacuum off and just listened. The faucet stopped. A second passed, and then the toilet flushed again. I said, not loudly but clear enough, "Hello?" Nothing. That pause before I moved felt like it lasted forever. I told myself it was probably a timer issue or a plumbing glitch, but I've been doing this job long enough. That's not what it sounded like. This sounded deliberate. I walked down the hallway toward the women's bathroom, the carpet deadening my steps. My hand was a little shaky when I reached for the door, and I don't even know why I knocked first, but I did. No answer. I pushed it open. No one inside. Both stalls were empty. The stall doors weren't even moving, like no one had just used them. The mirror was slightly fogged, though, like someone had just washed their hands. I backed out, slower than I walked in. My mind was running laps, trying to come up with something that made sense. I even opened the break room door next to it, thinking maybe someone had ducked in there. Nothing. Right then I heard it again. The toilet flushed behind me. I swear to God I froze, just locked up. Then the sink started. Same weak sputter, same flow. I turned and stared at the bathroom door, which I had just closed behind me. I didn't go back in. Instead, I stepped backwards down the hall like an idiot, keeping my eyes on that door, as if something might step out. My heart was thumping so hard I could feel it in my jaw. I was telling myself, out loud now, "You're tired. It's a sensor. It's just old plumbing. It's nothing." But I didn't believe a word of it. The weirdest part? There was no sound of movement, no footsteps, no doors creaking, no paper towel dispenser. Just the flush, then the sink. It felt like whatever was in there didn't need to move at all, like it was just there. I left the vacuum in the hallway. I didn't even bother finishing that floor. I walked downstairs trying to be calm, but I didn't look back once. As I reached the lobby, I saw the security guy coming in through the back entrance. Dave, older guy, friendly, always brings me a donut when our shifts overlap. He looked up and said, "You all right, man?" "You look pale." I said, "Did anyone go upstairs after the firm left?" He shook his head. "Nope, just me now. You're the only one with a key card aside from them." "Why?" I didn't answer him right away. "Something weird with the plumbing?" He laughed, but I wasn't joking. I heard it flush, I said, flat. Twice. Sink, too. Nobody in there. He stopped smiling then. Which bathroom? Women's. He didn't say anything, just stared at me a moment, then finally said, Yeah, you're not the first. That was it. He didn't elaborate, didn't offer a story. Just said that and walked past me toward his office, like it was a closed topic. I grabbed my stuff, signed out, and left the building. I never asked him again. Story 7. I worked overnight shifts at a large retail chain in Albuquerque. You know the type. Too much fluorescent light, mannequins with dead eyes, racks of clothes no one wants during the day, let alone at 2 a.m. We weren't open to the public during floor sets, just a skeleton crew moving walls and resetting displays based on some god-awful plan corporate sent from 1,000 miles away. That night it was just me, Tyler, and our manager, Dawn. She stayed in the back most of the time, unless she was making sure we weren't slacking off. Tyler and I stuck together near the juniors section. It was already past 3 a.m., and the weirdness always seemed to start around then. Like the store shifted a little when it knew no one else was watching. Tyler and I were talking horror movies. I remember it started when I asked if he'd seen the original Hellraiser. He goes, Man, that one messed me up. But nothing scared me more than Freddy when I was a kid. Yeah, I said, pushing a rack of leggings across the tile. You mean the old one? Nightmare on Elm Street, yeah. I couldn't sleep after that for days. That song still creeps me out. I didn't need to ask what song. We both kind of started singing it. Quiet at first, almost joking. 1, 2, Freddy's coming for you. We both grinned, kind of embarrassed. 3, 4, better lock your door. The air in the store felt weird then, like a vacuum. I felt a subtle pressure in my ears. 5, 6, grab your crucifix. Neither of us said anything about it, but our voices got a little quieter. 7, 8, gonna stay up late. 9, 10, Tyler said it with a half smile, but his voice dropped. And I said it with him, never sleep again. The second those words left our mouths, a sound exploded across the store, like metal hitting tile. I actually jumped. We both turned and saw an entire wall-mounted clothing rail, at least 8 feet long, just lying on the floor. All the hangers, all the shirts still on them, scattered across the aisle like someone had yanked it straight out of the drywall. We hadn't touched that rail all night. It was mounted into the slat wall above one of the feature tables. We hadn't been anywhere near it, and it wasn't even overloaded. It was maybe a dozen button-downs, evenly spaced. What the fuck, Tyler said. I walked over. I was expecting to see the brackets broken or the slat wall cracked. Something. But the hardware was still attached to the bar, like someone had just lifted it off clean. I bent down and looked closer. There's no way, I said. This thing was locked in. No shit, Tyler whispered. He didn't come closer. I looked back at him. His face was pale. We didn't touch it, right? I haven't been near that wall tonight, he said. Swear to God. I started picking up the hangers, but honestly, my hands were shaking. Something about the timing freaked me out. We hadn't just been talking about Freddy. We'd sung that line. We weren't messing around. We weren't pulling some prank. We weren't even near it. We told Dawn, but she just kind of brushed it off. Said maybe the brackets weren't in right. But she wouldn't come out and look. I remember that. She didn't walk out of the stockroom even once after we told her. Tyler didn't want to talk about it anymore. He stopped cracking jokes, just put his earbuds in, and stayed glued to his own section until shift ended. I couldn't stop thinking about it. Couldn't shake how sudden it was. How violent it sounded, like it had been ripped out, and not once did the alarms go off. The motion sensors, the security gates, none of it made a peep. After we clocked out, I sat in my car for a while before starting it. Just sat there with my hands on the wheel listening. The silence felt heavier than usual, like the world outside hadn't caught up yet. Tyler quit 2 weeks later. Didn't say why. He just didn't show up one night. When I messaged him, he left me on red. As for me, I stayed a little longer. But I never sang that song again, and I never touched that wall. Story 8, I used to work overnights in a group home about 15 minutes outside a town you've probably never heard of, in northern Ontario. 4 adult residents, all with developmental disabilities, and they each had their own room. Most of them had behavioral stuff, sometimes violent, the kind of place where you double-check the locks and keep track of sharp objects. The house was tucked between dense forest and a quiet dirt road. There were a couple of other homes further down, but they were empty seasonal cabins. No cell service unless you hiked up the road a ways. Nights there were dead silent. No traffic, no planes overhead, just the occasional rustle in the trees that could be anything from a raccoon to a bear. We did two-person overnights. One staff stayed up, the other got to crash on the couch in the living room. We'd switch halfway through the night. I was still relatively new then, filling in for someone on leave, and this was only my second shift at that house. That night I was up first. Around 2:30 a.m., I was just finishing logging a note when I heard something odd, wet tapping, like fingers slapping against tile. I followed the sound to Mark's room. He was one of the residents with self-injurious behavior, so I didn't hesitate to open his door. He was sitting cross-legged in the middle of the floor, shirtless. The lights were off except for the hallway spill behind me. I saw glistening streaks on the walls. My brain didn't connect it at first, but when I stepped in closer, I smelled it. Metallic, sharp. Blood. His arms were streaked with red. He must have ripped open an old scab on his elbow. But it wasn't just random smears. He'd painted symbols, circles, lines crossing through them. Some kind of language, maybe? I flicked the light on, and he didn't even flinch. "Mark, what are you doing?" I asked. "You hurt yourself again?" He looked up at me, eyes wide, calm, almost expectant. He smiled a little and said, "Don't worry. They're coming tonight." I froze. "Who's coming?" He didn't answer, just kept staring like he was watching something behind me. I backed out of the room and called for my coworker, Jordan, who was supposed to be sleeping. He came out of the living room rubbing his eyes, and I told him what I saw. He went to help Mark clean up while I grabbed the house phone to call the on-call supervisor. Everything needed to be documented when there was blood. I walked into the living room and noticed right away something was off. The sliding door that led to the back deck, it was open. Not wide, maybe a foot, but open. The same door I had checked not even 20 minutes ago when I locked up. I paused with the phone in my hand. That door didn't open unless someone unlocked it and physically pulled it. We didn't have automatic locks or anything fancy. I walked over slowly, thinking maybe the wind had done it, even though that made no sense. It had been dead still all night, and that's when I saw it. Out on the deck, maybe 6 feet from the door, was this animal. At first I thought it was a coyote, but it was off, bigger, taller in the shoulders. Its fur was patchy and matted, and it had this jerky, unnatural way of moving, like its legs didn't quite work right. Its head was low, eyes fixed right on me. I didn't breathe. It stepped forward. I slammed the door shut, yanked the lock, and stumbled back, knocking the phone off the receiver. Jordan came running. "What happened?" "There's something out there," I said, pointing at the door. "Something tried to come in." He looked through the glass but didn't see anything. I grabbed the landline again, hands shaking, and called the police. I didn't even care how stupid it sounded. "There was an animal trying to get into the house," I told them. "No, I don't know what kind. Bigger than a coyote." They said they'd send someone to check the area, but reminded me it could be ours. Small town. I sat on the couch, trying to calm down. Mark stayed quiet for the rest of the night. Didn't say another word about them. By the time the sun came up, the blood was cleaned off the walls, the symbols were gone, and it looked like nothing had happened. Police never found tracks. No prints on the deck, no hair, no blood, nothing. Just empty forest. Mark never brought it up again. We didn't talk about it after that either, at least not on shift. I finished my rotation there and didn't go back. Story 9. I don't talk about this much, only told my girlfriend once, and I think she thought I was messing with her. I'm not. I live in Sacramento now, but this happened back when I lived in Santa Clara, about 6 years ago. I was working QA at a small software company, testing an educational animation app for tablets, the kind where you set up a toy or clay figure, take pictures at intervals, and animate it. It was for kids, nothing groundbreaking. My shift was the odd one. 5 p.m. to 1 a.m. I preferred it. Less people around, I could just focus. We had this project where we needed to do soak testing, basically leaving the app running overnight to see if it bugged out after hours of continuous use. We did this all the time, usually with battery or memory drain tests. This time, though, we were testing the camera mode. The idea was to point the tablet camera at something still and take one photo per minute all night. We had this open floor office space, cubicles off to the side, but a wide central area where people had meetings or just ate lunch. That night, I set the iPad on a tripod and pointed it straight across the floor. Nothing special, just a row of mesh swivel chairs and a few desks pushed to the side. I adjusted the timer, hit start, and left it running. Next morning, I came in, checked the battery. It was still going. I stopped it, saved the capture, and started scrubbing through the footage. It's not like video, it's more like a stop-motion flipbook. You get these staccato jumps through time. At first, I saw the office with a few developers working late, then fewer, then none. Then the cleaning crew came through, wiped a few tables, vacuumed a little, then left. Lights went off. Total darkness. Then still dark for hours, until just barely before sunrise, when the windows started to glow faint blue. Then lights flick on. Same static scene. Except something felt off. I scrubbed back, watched the transition again. Darkness. Lights. And then I saw it. One of the chairs. A basic office swivel chair. It had moved. Like not just bumped a little. It was 10, maybe 12 feet from where it had been, facing the opposite direction. I was so sure I'd missed something. Maybe the cleaning crew pushed it accidentally and didn't push it back? I checked earlier frames. No, chair was still where it was until the moment the lights come back on. There was no frame of it in motion. One frame, chair by the table. Next frame, chair in the middle of the floor, turned around. It was subtle, but when you're QA, that stuff jumps out at you. I stared at it for a long time. I asked the janitor that day when he came in. His name was Miguel. I asked him, "Hey, you working last night?" He said, "Yeah." I asked, "Did you move any chairs? Like out of the way or something?" He looked confused and said no. I showed my boss. He laughed and said something like, "Guess we've got a ghost." I didn't find it funny. There was no jump cut, no camera shake. The app worked fine. The chair had just jumped. No sign of how. That night I set it up again. Same exact place. But this time, I made sure. I took a picture of the room before I left, on my phone. I pushed all the chairs neatly into their desks, not one out of line. No one else was working in that section. Not even the coders stayed late. I checked the calendar. No meetings, no bookings. I came back next day, pulled the footage again, watched it. Same pattern. People leave, Miguel cleans up, lights out. Hours of darkness. And then right before sunrise, just like the day before, lights pop on. And this time, it wasn't just one chair. There were 4 chairs that had moved. One was almost up against the far wall, facing away from the desk cluster. One had rotated 180 degrees. One had slid about 5 feet to the left. And the last one? That one had turned slightly, like someone had sat down, spun a little, and got up. I felt sick, like actual nausea. I went over to the area, looked for marks on the floor. Nothing. No scuff, no track, no skid. It was carpet. You'd expect to see drag lines or compressed fibers. Nothing. I asked Miguel again. He swore no one had gone into that room. I asked around the dev team. They'd all gone home at 9 p.m. No one had badge scanned into the building after the cleaning crew. I checked the security logs. 0 entries. I even checked the office Slack logs. Nothing weird, just memes and late bug reports. I showed the footage to a coworker, Lindsay from UI. She watched it with her eyebrows up. "That's not a glitch?" she asked. I said no. I checked frame by frame. No artifacts, no overlapping images, no signs of duplication. We used internal storage, not cloud, no compression issues. "I don't like that," she said. "That's not okay." We didn't talk about it again. A few days later, someone accidentally knocked the iPad off the tripod, cracked the lens, and the camera feature got shelved for other reasons. I never ran that test again. And honestly, I never stayed past midnight again either. I have no explanation for it. And I've tried. Maybe a vibration moved the chairs, but they were different weights, moved different distances. There's no air duct down there. No fans. It's a sealed floor. Earthquake? No tremors reported. I checked. What creeps me out the most is the stillness, that in-between time. You don't see them move. You only see that they have moved. Like whatever did it, didn't want to be seen. Story 10. I'm Tyler. I live in southwestern Ohio, not far from the Indiana line. Small towns, cornfields, old cemeteries no one visits. I work third shift for the county water department. Hydrant maintenance mostly, making sure everything's in shape for the fire crews. It's boring work most nights. We run in crews of 3, working back roads, industrial lots, schools. You get used to the quiet. You even start to like it. This happened last October. I remember because we just had the first cold snap, and the air had that kind of brittle stillness to it. You know, where sound carries too far, and everything feels sharper than it should. We were assigned the cemetery routes that week, places out by Route 28, where it's just farmland and graves, no streetlights, just our truck, some flashlights in the cold. That night, it was me, Corey, and Rob. Rob was new. He was nervous from the jump, muttering about how cemeteries gave him the creeps. Corey was giving him hell for it, but honestly, I didn't like that road either. Something about it always felt off. We pulled up to the cemetery near New Burlington. No signage, no gate, just a rusted iron fence and one of those old oaks that twist over the road like it's trying to grab you. Across the street, someone had tied a rope swing to a low branch. I'd seen it during the day before. Always looked out of place, like someone tried to bring childhood into a spot that didn't want it. It was just before 2 a.m. No wind, not a single breeze. The truck thermometer said 41 degrees Fahrenheit. We were halfway through checking a hydrant when Rob nudged me with his elbow. "You see that?" "What?" I asked, shining my light over the wrench. He pointed across the road. The swing. It was moving. Not just swaying a little from leftover momentum. No. It was swinging like a kid was on it. Not violent or erratic, just smooth. Back and forth. We all stood up, silent, watching. There was no wind. I can't say that enough. Not a rustle in the trees, not a gust against your face. You could hear Corey's jacket when he shifted his arms. That's how still it was. Rob whispered, "There's nobody there." And he was right. I walked across the road with my flashlight, heart hammering like I'd just run a mile. I don't know what I thought I was going to do. Maybe prove it was a trick, or win I just couldn't feel. But when I got within 5 feet of the swing, it stopped. Just dead stop. No slowing down, no gradual easing. It just froze midair, hung there a beat longer than it should have, then dropped limp. I didn't even breathe, just stared at it. Then I heard something behind me. Footsteps, crunching gravel. I spun around with the flashlight. No one. Corey and Rob were still across the street, staring at me like statues. Then I heard it again, behind me. Crunch. 2 slow steps, but the road was gravel, and I was standing on asphalt. I stepped back, aimed the flashlight into the trees by the fence. Nothing. Just headstones and the shadows between them. That's when Corey shouted, "Tyler, come back!" His voice cracked. I'd never heard him sound like that before. I didn't argue. I turned and ran straight back across the road. As soon as I hit the edge, that damn swing started moving again. Back and forth, same speed, same rhythm. Corey was pale as hell, and Rob was just shaking. "I saw something," Corey said, not taking his eyes off the swing. "In the cemetery. Behind you." "What do you mean?" I asked, even though I didn't want the answer. He swallowed. "It wasn't standing. It was hanging. From one of the trees." I looked at him, and he added, "It moved." When the swing stopped, it moved. I didn't ask for more. Neither did Rob. We just packed up, locked the hydrant cap, and got in the truck. We drove 10 miles in silence before anyone said a word. "I looked it up the next day," Corey finally said. "That cemetery used to be part of a juvenile home in the early 1900s. Kids who died there, orphans mostly, got buried behind the property. Some of them, they weren't exactly treated well. I don't know if I believe in ghosts, but I've worked night shifts for years. I've seen weird stuff. Drugged up guys stumbling through fields, animals acting nuts, all kinds of backwoods nonsense. But that was different. It wasn't just creepy. It felt wrong. Like we weren't supposed to see it. Like something was showing us what it could do. We don't take the cemetery routes anymore. Management doesn't know why. We just switch out shifts when they come up.